All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the 44th webinar in the Offshore Wind series, Learning from the Experts. I am Leila Lashmawi. I'm a Senior Project Manager with NYSERDA's Offshore Wind team, and it is my pleasure to be joined by today's expert, Thinh Nguyen, with the New York Independent System Operator, or NYISO. Before I introduce Thinh, a few reminders for participants and some background on this webinar series. Next slide, please. Firstly, if you are experiencing any technical issues, please contact Sal Graven at the email address on the bottom of this slide. This webinar is being recorded, and the recordings and presentation slides for all the webinars in the Learning from the Expert series are available on NYSERDA's website at the address on this slide. All participants have been muted. We will have time for Q&A following the presentation, so please use the Q&A function to submit your questions for the speaker. You may submit them at any time during the presentation, and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. New York State is working to advance the responsible and cost-effective development of at least 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. Offshore wind is a critical component in achieving the state's goals of 70% renewable sources of electricity by 2030 and 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040. While offshore wind has been providing clean energy to other parts of the world for several decades, this industry is brand new to New Yorkers. To provide interested stakeholders and members of the public with accessible, impartial information and opportunities for engagement on specific topics of interest, NYSERDA is hosting this educational webinar series called Learning from the Experts to connect the public with independent experts in key topics in offshore wind. We endeavor to select learning from the expert speakers based on their expertise, not necessarily for an alignment of opinions with NYSERDA or the state of New York. If you would like to suggest a topic or a speaker for a future webinar, you can email us at offshore-wind@nyserda.ny.gov or fill out a survey also available on our website. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter. Next slide, please. It is now my pleasure to introduce Thinh Nguyen. Thinh has held the position of Senior Manager of Interconnection Projects for NYISO since March 2018. Prior to that, he held various positions at the NYISO since its inception in November 1999. Mr. Nguyen received a Master's of Engineering from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, a Master's of Business Administration from the College of St. Rose. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I will hand things over now to our speaker, Thinh. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Lila. I hope you can hear my voice. Thank you, Lila. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Lila, for introducing myself. And also, thank you, NYSERDA, for giving me the opportunity to share with the stakeholder related to the New York ISO cluster study process. So with that, could you please go to the next slide? So as you can see on this agenda, we're going to talk about the purpose, the missions of the connection study process, the type of connection service that the process provide, the role of entity that each of the party may be played in the process, and also the overview of the cluster study process step and timeline itself. And after that, we have question session so that you can ask any additional question if I have not addressed during this presentation. So with that, next slide, please. As you can see right there, the purpose of my team, which is the Interconnection Project team at the New York ISO, is to evaluate the impact of project generation, transmission, and load on the system. This presentation is actually focused on the generation and connection process procedure itself, where we're going to identify and cost allocate upgrade facility for the proposed project to reliably connect into the system. In addition, if they also asking for some capacity, we also make sure they are deliverable and I'll come up with a system deliverability upgrade for such project to be able to deliverable and cost allocate them for such upgrade. Next slide, please. So this slide is discussing about the type service that normally that the generation project may receive requests. For example, for those projects that need to want to participate in New York ISO energy market or applicable ancillary service market, they have to obtain the energy resource interconnection service, where they will be subject to the New York ISO minimum interconnection standard in order for a project to be reliably connected to the system and also receive such service. And then for those projects that would wish to become a New York ISO ICAP supplier, to receive the unforced capacity, the deliverability rights, then such project can request the capacity resource interconnection service. And in order for the project to be able to receive that kind of service, it will be subject to the New York ISO deliverability standard, where we're going to make sure that the project is deliverable within its capacity region and have no impact with other capacity region. Next slide, please. So this slide is talking about the role and responsibility of each of the party. As you can see that in the study process, they're going to be three party: the connection customer itself, the New York ISO, and the transmission owner. All three parties play very crucial role in order for this cluster study process to be successful. For example, the role of the connection customer, the customer, they themselves have to decide where they want to propose, and then they submit the interconnection request. And as I discussed earlier, there are two types of service there. So depending on if the developer want to request both ARIS and CRIS, they will submit the interconnection request application. But if they are an existing facility where they don't have the capacity resource interconnection service before, then they want to increase further their CRIS rights, then they can submit the CRIS only application. And the customer need to also ensure that all the application requirements that they have to adhere to have to be met as part of the application request. For example, some requirement like the site control, the application fee, the study deposit, etc. That they have to met that during the application window. And also they also to apply need to meet all requirements throughout our study process. If we need information from the customer. Other thing is, as I looked earlier, is the customer also need to be financially responsible for their study costs, and they have to have the commercial readiness. For example, in the next few slides, we will be discussing about various study phase where the customer may have to post the additional study deposit, where we call it readiness deposit. And at the end of the study, if they accept the cost allocation, then they're going to be responsible for the system upgrade cost. And the customer will participate in our study process to discuss with New York ISO and the connecting transmission owner relate to the study result. Subsequent to that, the next step will be work with the New York ISO and transmission owner to develop and execute the interconnection agreement, so that the developer can go into service and construction and service after that. So those are the role and responsibility of the customer. For the ISO side, we got to coordinate the connection study process. We got to work with the transmission owner, identify who they are as the connecting transmission owner or the affected transmission owner for each of those applications. And then we got a leading in conducting the study itself. We coordinate our study result with the stakeholder through the New York ISO stakeholder process, such as the operating committee. And then we're working with the customer and the TO to develop and execute the interconnection agreement. And subsequent to that, we will file the agreement with FERC. For the transmission owner, their role will be participate in the cluster study process itself to make sure that the study that the ISO conduct will meet all the applicable reliability requirements. Especially the transmission owner also have the local criteria. They have to are part of the applicable reliability requirement, and the study have to also meet their requirement. In addition to other applicable requirements like the NERC, NPCC, and NYSRC. NERC is for those are the reliability standard that a project need to be subject to. and then they're going to involve in the construction of the connections facility and work with the New York ISO and the customer to develop the agreement. So those are the high-level summary related to the role and responsibility of each of the party involved in the study process. Next slide, please. So this slide is summarized the cluster study process. As you can see right there, the study process have various stages. For example, the application window stage, the customer engagements, the phase 1 study, and the phase 2 study. So each of these stages have a different day and time frame. For example, the application window during the normal process, the window only open for 45 days. However, because this is the first time we apply this process where the ISO just recently filed with FERC on May 2nd, on May 1st, related to the New York ISO Interconnection Standard, and ask for the effective date and implement that new process on May 2nd. And we're gonna implement the transitional cluster study. That study start on August 1st, where for that study, the application window will have 75 days rather than for the subsequent cluster study where it's only 45 days. So the application window, this is where the customer have to submit the application in, and they have to adhere to all the requirements as I alluded earlier in the first slide, that their responsibility. And once we receive the application, the ISO gonna validate the application to see whether the application meet all the requirements or not. If they're not, then we will tell them, what are the deficiency, and then the customer have certain day and time to cure that deficiency, and they can cure that until the application window is closed. If the for some reason, if the customer submit the application at the last day of the window, then that customer may not have the ability to cure that deficiency. So that's why we are always encouraging the customer or potential customer. You need to look at the when the application window open, and try to get your application in as soon as you can. Otherwise, if there's any deficiency of your application, you may not have enough time to cure it. And if you're not able to cure it within the cure period, then your project can be withdrawn from the cluster study process. So that is the high-level summary related to the application window. And then after that, once the application window closed, the next stage is the cluster study customer engagement window. This is where the transmission owner look at the proposal project to do a screening whether their project is physically feasible or not. For example, if there are multiple projects going to some substation, and that substation cannot accommodate 1 or 2 projects, then we have to, at the end of the customer engagement window, we have to provide the result to the customer. For those customers where the projects are not physically feasible, they cannot move forward to the next study phase. So this is also a good segue to that for some customer, if they want to preventing the potential that where their proposal could potentially physically infeasible, the New York ISO also have a process called pre-application process. That is an optional process where the customer, before they come into the customer engagement window, they can also have submit the pre-application process. They can start looking for the information related to that POI, where the TO have the readily available information. They can share with the customer on that. And part of that, they can also including potential any physical feasible problem that the TO may foresee or seen. They also share for that type of study process. However, even though with that, it's not an assurance, because when the TO share that such kind of information are part of the pre-application process, it's just for those single particular project. During the cluster study process, because there are multiple projects maybe coming to the same substation, so the physical infeasibility could become realized during that situation. So under that circumstances, in our study process, there is no priority for any projects that coming in. However, we have a limited priority during for the circumstances of the physically infeasible. For example, like the example I discussed earlier, let's say we have 5 projects coming in, and then the substation can only handle 2, then the other 3 projects cannot be joined the cluster study, and that's due to the priority of the project when they submit application in, and they have a along with that submit the application in, we will assign them a queue position, and that queue position will place the priority for such project for this limited circumstances where we run into physically infeasible situation, right? And similar to the transitional cluster study of the application window, the normal course of the customer engagement window would be 70 days. However, for the transitional study period, it will be 90 days. Like I looked earlier, that this is the first time that we implement this process, so the timeline for the transitional cluster study process will be longer for the application window and the cluster customer engagement window compared to the normal process. Otherwise, the phase 1 and the phase 2 study, the timeline, whether it's a transitional cluster study process or the future next cluster study process, the timeline studies is the same for either process. For example, for phase 1, it's going to take about 190 days for that study, and for phase 2, it's going to take about 270 days for that. And for phase 1, basically, what does it mean by phase 1 study, and what is the result of the phase 1 study? So the study of phase 1 is focused on the local system upgrade of the project. Normally, another terminology for that is the attachment facility. For any project that proposed to our system, you have to ensure that you have to the attachment, make sure that the attachment facility have to meet the local transmission owner design criteria. So you have to expand that substation, or you have to build a new substation where the interconnection customer proposed. And part of that process, likewise, very much similar to the customer engagement window. Now you may have to dig deeper into the potential physically infeasible, because during the customer engagement window, we may only potentially look at the high level on screening process, but during the phase 1 study, we may look into depth, and under that circumstances, we may find a project that even though it's passing the customer engagement window, but during the phase 1 study process, it may run into the physical infeasibility. For example, now we may look depth into like the generator lead that connect into the substation. It may run into some kind of subterranean problem, something like that. We may not catch that during the customer engagement window. But the end of that phase 1 study process, as I shared earlier, that the customer will know what is a potential attachment facility study cost. This is where the POI, or the point of connection where the project proposed to connect to, how much it costs to expand the substation or build a new substation to accommodate the project. And at the end of that study, the developer have 10 business days to make the decision whether they're going to accept their want to move forward to phase 2 or not. And if they decide to move forward to the phase 2, then they also have to post some kind of security. And the next few slides, I will go into detail about the readiness deposit, study deposit. Right now I'm just give you a high-level summary, the difference between each of the study stage of the cluster study process. So that is the main finding of the phase 1 study. And why do we choose, this is a decision point, because in the cluster study process is actually leveraged on our class year study process, where in the past of 20 something years that we have look at the class year study process, majority of these system upgrade cost to the developer normally the localized system upgrade and the CTO AF cost. So even with that kind of cost, the project itself cannot afford, they don't see the project economical relate to that study cost, then there's no point to move forward the study process itself, because the next phase study, that's going to be additional upgrade cost that the customer may be responsible to, because the next study phase cost will look at all the analytical, as I alluded earlier, that for example, for those projects that want to seeking the ARIS, which is the Energy Resource Interconnection Service, we have to subject that those projects to the minimum interconnection standard. And then if they're seeking for CRIS, then it's also need to run through the deliverability study process. So that's why there gotta be more additional costs, and that study would take about 270 days to complete. Although it said that 270 days to complete, but in order for us to be able to achieve that, basically we have to a lot of those input into that type of study have to be also moved in parallel while the study process is ongoing. For example, we have to repair all the study base case to perform those kind of analysis during the application window, during the customer engagement window, and also run some of the analysis and continue to build order case during the study phase 1 while ongoing. So the 270 days is actually is not the study process itself is not sequential. Although it appears sequential, but for phase 2, in order to achieve the study timeline, all of those have to move in parallel while all the state of the process is still ongoing. So that is the summary related to the study cluster study phase 2. So at the end of that study phase 2, we're gonna share with the customer what are their total costs related to their local system upgrade, their non-local system upgrade due to the based on the minimum interconnection standard analysis, and also their system deliverability upgrade if they asking for capacity resource service. And then the developer have the go through that iterative decision period. So basically, after we finish the study, we take the study to our operating committee for approval. Once our operating committee approve, we're gonna trigger the decision. And what happened is like we gotta share that this year. The first iteration of decision is the customer have 30 days to respond to whether they accept the cost allocation or not. If all the projects accept the cost allocation, or all the project reject the cost allocation, then we can end the study. However, if there is any one of the project reject its cost allocation, the ISO have 14 days to recalculate the cost allocation for the remaining class year member or cluster member, and then the customer have 7 calendar days to make the decision. And we continue to continue to do that process until everyone accept its cost allocation or reject its cost allocation. And so that is the iterative decision period description, high level look like. So next slide, please. So this slide is also summarize the cluster study process, but it's provide more detail. Like for example, what are the specific requirement during each of the study of the stage. For example, the application window, as you can see right there, is 45 days, and this is where you put up application in. Part of the application in, you have to put the site control along with the application. You have to put the provide the non-application fee, non-refundable application fee, $10,000, and those are cash only for those projects that seeking ARIS and CRIS. For those projects not only seeking CRIS only, then their non-application fee will be $5,000, and those fee are cash only. In addition to that, they also need to post the study deposit, and the study deposit will be depending on the size of the projects. For example, project less than 80 megawatt, the study deposit could be $100,000, and project between 80 and 200 megawatt, the study deposit is $150,000, and project greater than 200 megawatt, the study deposit for would be $250,000. For CRIS only project, regardless of its size, it's gonna post the security for $50,000. I mean, study deposit for $50,000, and the study deposit can be in various form, cash or letter of credit or surety bond. Those are the type of payments that the customer can post for the study deposit, right? And as I discussed earlier, the customer, once we receive the application, New York ISO have 10 business day to validate the customer application. During the transition period, we have 15 days, and then subsequently, developer, if there's any deficiency, developer have 10 business day to cure. During the transitional period, the customer have 15 business day to cure instead. After the application window, we will start the customer engagement window, and in the customer engagement here window, we have some of the timeline that we indicate to the provide information to the customer. For example, within 10 business day after the customer engagement window start, we gotta publish the member list, so that the member can look at their who are the member, and then also, because of the, as I alluded earlier, if some project know that there's a certain location where they're connected to, potentially run into feasible problem, because so many projects connect to the same location, they have the opportunity to changing their POI, and they have to change that POI within 5 business days after we publish the list. Otherwise, any change subsequent to that will be considered as a material. The project will be dropped out. Actually, in fact, because of this process, we want to move fast. The opportunity to changing a project very limited. As you can see right here, once you submit the application in, the only opportunity that you can change of your application would be the POI, and it's also limited to the time frame that you can only change the POI up to kind of like 15 business day after the customer engagement window start. And then like you see during the customer engagement window, as I discussed earlier, the study scope of it will be the TO. Probably look at the potential feasibility feasible of the project. They're going to screen that to see whether the project could potentially run through that type of problem or not. After that, the ISO will organize a scoping meeting where we're going to share the result to the member, and in order for the member to be able to attending that, because a lot of information we discuss here relate to critical energy infrastructure information, so therefore the customer had to have all of those NDA in place in order for them to be able to attend that meeting. If not, they cannot attending that. Once we have the scoping meeting discussions, the customer have 5 business days to decide whether they want to move forward with phase 1 study or not. and in along with their decision that they want to move forward the projects to phase 1, they have to post the readiness deposit number 1, and the readiness number 1 would be based on the size of the project. It's 4,000 megawatt, $4,000 per megawatt. So for a 100 megawatt project, you have to post $400,000, for that, and then if for some reason the project decide to withdraw, they don't want to move forward to phase 1, then due to non-physical infeasibility problem, then the project gonna be subject to a withdrawal penalty of 25% of their study deposit. We put all of this in place to make sure that only ready project or surety project that want to go through the study process will go through this kind of study process. Any speculation, all of this we put in place to deter those speculation projects where if they too many speculation projects come through our study process, it's gonna be potentially delay the study process itself. So that's why we put all of this measure in place to ensure that to put the safeguard and to make sure that only project that real projects can move through. So as I discussed earlier, part of phase 1 study, the scope of that study is to identify and cost estimate for the local system upgrade, and also once the project is once we complete that study, the project within 10 business days they can make a decision whether they want to move forward to phase 2 study or not, and if so, along with that decision, they also need to post they could potentially post the readiness deposit number 2 if that readiness is greater than their number 2 is greater than their readiness number 1. Or they just post the incremental, and that is just an incremental amount, not the additional amount. So and that is the rate of the readiness number 1, or 20% of their potential local system upgrade and CTOAF, which is the connecting transmission owner attachment facility cost. And similar to the potential withdrawal penalty for those projects that withdraw not due to the physical infeasibility of the project, but because they changed their mind, then they got a subject to withdrawal penalty. 50% of their study deposit plus 10% of their readiness deposit will be subject to to the penalty. Once we at the end of the phase 2 this decision period 2, we gotta jump to phase 2. In the phase 2 study, as I alluded earlier, this is where we do a lot of analytical analysis, where we identify additional system upgrade beyond the POI. But at the same time, this is also the time that when we revisit or re-update the analysis of phase 1, because due to project dropout, now the local system upgrade may be different. For example, let's say during phase 1, we have 3 projects going through the same substation. We cost allocate for those 3 projects, or we come up with a system upgrade for those 3 projects, and then at the end of the phase 1 study, one of the project drop out. So during the phase 2 study, we have to reconfigure the system for the remaining member. So that's why we need to update that. So at the end of that phase 2 study, we're gonna share with the customer the potential system upgrade costs, what they are, how much, how long it may potentially construct, so that developer can make a decision whether they want to move forward with the accept the cost allocation or not. If they do, then all the they have to post 100% of security to the transmission owner, where they are responsible for the system upgrade. and those security after they accept and they post security for those upgrade, it could potentially subject to forfeit if a project later on withdraw from the ISO queue due to whatever reason they may have. For those projects that at the end of phase 2 study that reject its cost allocation, it's gonna be subject to a withdrawal penalty. For example, 100% of its study deposit and 20% of its readiness deposit number 2 will be subject to withdrawal. So that after that, after the decision, the cluster study process, the next step will be negotiate the interconnection agreement for those projects that accept its cost allocation. That is the end of my presentation for this slide. So next slide, please. So this slide we're talking about the potential, how long it take or the for the cluster, the sequence of the cluster study. So as you can see in the study timeline, potentially the cluster study could start approximately every 18 months. And you can see right there, there could potentially the subsequent cluster study process maybe a little bit overlap with the prior study process. And although there's an overlap, there's we look at it, we don't see that there's going to be a lot of rework or inefficiency. However, we see that it could potentially help the customer to speed up in for the subsequent study process, because the earlier that we start, then it's also the earlier that potentially we're going to finish that process. So that's why we find that there's a balance of that. There's a little bit overlap, but it may not cause any rework or inefficient. And we also build in our process just in case that for some reason the prior cluster study process is not complete. The member of that cluster study process in prior, they can always submit the contingent project in the subsequent cluster study process, so that for some reason if they reject the cost allocation in the prior cluster study, they already have a project in the subsequent cluster study to move forward with. Next slide, please. Wow. Okay. Yes. So yes. So this is the end of my presentation. I don't know, Lila, I'll turn it back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So yes, a very in-depth, very technical presentation. Thank you again. We do have a few questions here to get us started. And folks, as you're listening, please feel free to drop more questions in the Q&A function on WebEx. But just to get us going, can you go back over what is the process for changing a project that is already part of a cluster study? If the customer wants to, say, for example, change their POI after the customer engagement window, do they drop out of the study and start all over again? Or what's the process if there's any changes while they're going through that process? Because certainly these are dynamic development plans.
Yeah. So Lila, I mean, as I alluded earlier, that with this new process, the process of changing a project very limited. For example, if once you submit the application in and we validate the application, anything that you change to the project beside the POI, we would consider as a material. And if the window application is still available, then you can submit a new application. Otherwise, you have to wait until the next cluster study to submit a new integration request for such change. So and if the change is during the course of the study, if you submit any change during the course of study, it will be deemed as a material. And if you still want to move forward with that change, then you will be kick off that cluster study process, you have to submit a new interconnection request for the subsequent cluster study process. Yeah. So the bottom line I want to share with the stakeholder is the change, the limited change that you can change is just the POI of your project, and even with that, it gotta be there's a limit of time for you to change that. Basically, it's a 15 business day after the customer engagement window is start. You know. But I want to add one more clarification. Once a project accepts its cost allocation post security, then the project can using a different process to do material modification for that, and that is subject that is depending on the change that the project contemplate to change have an impact on cost and timing of the subsequent cluster study process or the project that went through the same process with it, and usually based on my experience, that is normally the time when the project would change, you know. So usually after they accept the cost allocation, we see a lot of requests from the customer to modify their project, to change their project subsequent to the completion of the cluster study.
Okay, there's many related questions here, so I will just pick one to start with. So as you know, among the modifications, if all of the technical aspects are the same, but the owner of the project ownership is changing hands, is this a non-material change allowed in the cluster study process, or is it more than that?
Like I said before, I mean, all of those have to be, you know, once you put application in, we don't allow change. So any of those relate administration change, it's best to do it after the even with the administration change, it's best to do after the cluster study process, you know.
All right. Along the lines of cost, so if a project accepts all of the cost allocations, how long do they have to build the project? So in other words, is there a penalty for getting approved for a POI and then claiming, you know, they have that headroom is allocated for them, and then taking a longer time to develop? Is there any additional costs associated with that? Or not actually develop, or if they don't actually develop the project to interconnect in that location at the end, what are kind of the time bounds once they've accepted all their costs?
Yes, great question. I mean, this is a actually this question a lot of customers have been asking this kind of question. Basically, in our cluster study process, once a project accepts its cost allocation, the project has to be in commercial operation within 4 years of the cluster study completion. If for some reason the project cannot be in commercial operation within 4 years, there is a process for them to further extend beyond the 4-year limit. And they can submit a material modification through the New York ISO by filling the facility modification form, submit that in, and follow our process procedure. In general, most of the time that we usually would extend the project if it demonstrates that the project shows some kind of what you call a reasonable effort that they move the project along. Now, part of the reviewing the COD extension, this is also potential that for the connecting transmission owner to also review whether the system upgrade costs should be updated or not. The reason we have to do that because, as you may not aware, that the developer had to post the security to the transmission owner, and the transmission owner is responsible to build those upgrades, and then eventually gonna own that facility. So just in case that for some reason the developer is not you know, go belly up, they go bankrupt, the transmission and there are other projects still rely on that upgrade. The transmission owner have to continue to build that upgrade facility, and therefore that's why we need to have some kind of security that the transmission owner can, hold and continue to build that project. So that's why when a project asking for a COD extension, New York ISO will work conjunction with the transmission owner to review all of the requirement, including like potential whether the system upgrade need to be revisited or not.
All right. Backtracking a bit, can you summarize and clarify for us at a high level, what is a cluster study?
Yes, yeah. So in the past, and maybe this is a great segue, why we arrive with a cluster study process. As for some of you are familiar with the New York ISO interconnection process, before May 1st, before we file the new interconnection standard interconnection procedure for a for generation interconnection procedure, we actually have 3 different kind of procedure called attachment X, S, and Z. Majority of the procedure X is for the large facility, Z is for the small gen facility, and the gut of all of those study process is including three separate process. For example, study stage. Optional feasibility study, system impact study, and then for the large facility, it's gonna be a class C study. For a small gen, it's gonna be individual facility study. So each of those projects during the optional feasibility study or system impact study, they all study on individual basis. For the last facility, after they complete the system reliability impact study, then they're gonna go to the class C studies where we're gonna study all of them together. But for the small gen, but during the course of study, if we don't find any non-local system upgrade, which is the upgrade beyond the POI, then that small gen gonna be go to for its small facility study. If we find non-local system upgrade, which is the upgrade beyond the POI, then the small gen has to go to the large facility. So as you can see right now, and based on my description, they're all on separate track. So when we study each of those projects, based on that during those study state, we may identify some kind of upgrade, but then when they go to class year due to system change, then they're gonna be a different upgrade. So the developer, not gonna know for sure what are their potential cost responsibility would be like, So and may also misleading them because of the upgrade we identify may now gonna be different. And it could potentially cut both way, right? It could be they may have additional upgrade, but they could also potentially have less upgrade due to system change. But that creates very much uncertainty, and also because of the way how we lay out like that, the study process potentially take much longer than the developer wish, because as we all know that New York State have very aggressive energy policy. So the more generation come into the system, the more it's gonna be able to support that kind of policy. So we have to come up with a process in a way that we can streamline that study process. That's why the cluster study process was the result of that. With this kind of process, all projects can come in at the same time, and we can study them all together with the same kind of study. But at the end of the study, the developer will know what are their cost responsibility, rather than a non-binding under the old process when they go through the optional feasibility study, system impact study, and then they only find out at the end of the class C study. So it's a huge change. And then with that, we will see that we hope that with this new change process, it will streamline the study process. It can move the project much faster than before.
Great. All right. A question then on how does the cluster study process interact with the Article 7 process? So is the cluster study in any way informed by the Article 7 certification for transmission projects in New York? Are the timelines linked in any sort of way? Can you describe just if and how there is interaction between those two processes?
Yeah, so I mean, for a project to join a cluster study, the requirement to join the cluster study is basically if a project have a demonstrate that they have a site control of the generating facility. The site control is basically of the generating facility just focus on the generating itself. There is no site control requirement to demonstrate that they have the right of way of their generator lead, or they also have this the site control of the new substation where they connected to the POI. You know, so any of those related to Article 7 is not of the that for some project may be required by this Public Service Commission if they meet the certain kind of requirement. That is the requirement by Public Service Commission. To join the cluster studies process, we don't require that, you know. And I understand that some of those projects that may if they apply for Article 7, they may have to show some kind of system impact study. One way for them to, I mean, this is my for them to be able to show that is to show that they're part of the cluster study process, because part of the cluster study process, we also look at the impact of all the project cumulatively to the system. And if they, you know, they go through that process, they met all the applicable reliability requirement in order for them to be able to reliably to connect to our system, you know. So that could be a potential evidence if they need to show to Public Service Commission to obtain the Article 7 application, you know.
Right. One more question in the queue for now. So folks, if you have more questions, we still have about 8 minutes to go. So we have time for more. But can projects hold multiple queue positions for different POIs? And what is the advantage of doing that? What are some of the disadvantages of doing that? I'm assuming maybe some folks on the call periodically pull the interconnection queue. I know I do. And you may see projects listed multiple times, but for different POIs. Why is that?
Yeah, so no, I mean, basically there is no in order for a project to join the cluster study, there is no alternative, you know. Basically there are no alternative to permit the project to have multiple IR within the cluster study. As I alluded earlier, you know, in our study process, the key thing is whether the project is physically feasible or not, right? So in order for us to be able to determine that, you know, you have to look at what the proposal project, which one they choose to go to, because now they have multiple POI there. There is no ability for us to figure out, you know, which project are gonna be impacted by such kind of alternative, you know, POI. So that's why the process was designed that you have to know what POI you choose, and if you want to do some kind of alternative POI, I mean, there's a lot of avenue that you can look in for that. For example, we had a pre-application process you can leverage on, or you can leverage on the customer the consultant to do that kind of informative study. But you know, the cluster study process is not set up for that kind of allowing the customer to have alternative application within the cluster study process, you know. Laila, if you speak, I think you're on mute.
I was going to ask, how can the study deposit be paid?
Yes. So basically, you know, once the developer submit application in, we also have through our portal, we also have the link information where they can wire the money through our bank account. Basically there is a bank information depending, and like I said before, if you're talking about the study deposit, the developer can pay cash, a letter of credit, or a surety bond. So there is a and if you go with letter of credit or surety bond, there's a certain requirement that you have to adhere to, and all of the information is a part of the we share that in our on our website. And if the developer need additional information, they can always reaching out to this New York ISO stakeholder service interconnection support team, where they can also answer that type of question.
Great. This is the last question in the queue, in our question queue. What is the difference between phase 1 and phase 2 that you're referencing in your presentation?
Yeah. Yes. So phase 1 is the study related to identify what are the potential local system upgrade costs to interconnect a project. So at the end of the phase 1 study, the developer will know what is the potential cost of their of the attachment facility at the POI, which is the point of connection that the project connected to. The phase 2 study is the study process where we subject the project to various interconnection process procedure. For example, a project asking for areas, we have to subject them to minimum connection standard, and that standard will make sure that they meet all the applicable reliability requirement. We're gonna study them. For example, we do like short circuit analysis and steady state analysis, stability analysis to make sure that the project reliably connect to the system. If they don't, we have to identify the system upgrade for the impacted projects. And also in the phase 2 study, as I discussed earlier, if a project want to become New York ISO capacity supplier, they have to have CRIS RISE, which is capacity resource and service. Then for such project, they will be subject to deliverability study. If they're not deliverable, then we have to identify the system delivery upgrade for those projects and cost allocate for them.
All right, that's the last of the questions. So thank you again, Thinh, for joining us, and thank you everyone for tuning in for this Learning from the Experts webinar. A reminder that the webinar recording and the presentation slides will be available on NYSERDA's website. And our next webinar will be July 10th, where Michael Kalivi and John Dalton at Power Advisory will discuss how offshore wind projects make their money. You can register for future webinars through our events page at wind.ny.gov. We also encourage you to check out past webinars. This is the 44th, so there are many. We encourage you to check those out on NYSERDA's website and our YouTube channel. And again, if you have requests for future topics you'd like to hear about in this series, please email us at offshorewind@nyserda.ny.gov or fill out a Learning from the Experts survey that's also posted on the website. So thank you again for joining us today, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Lila. Take care.
Thanks.